Today on the Big 3 in 30, Anthony Edwards wins All-Star Game MVP.
Anthony Edwards wins the MVP trophy.
Kevin Durant's Twitter drama overshadows the All-Star weekend.
Another saga in the Kevin Durant Twitter burner story has appeared.
And the Cavs hope to make a deep playoff run with James Harden added to the roster.
What do you think the addition of Harden does to change this approach, if at all?
This is the Big 3 in 30 NBA. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 in 30 NBA starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 in 30 your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. NBA All-Star Weekend wrapped Sunday night with the Stars team beating the Stripes team in the championship game, and Anthony Edwards winning All-Star Game MVP. Locked On Wolves host Ben Beacon has more on Ant's standout night.
So the headline is, of course, Anthony Edwards wins the MVP trophy for his performance on Sunday. So if you missed it, very quickly, the format was 4 mini games. And honestly, this is, I think, the worst thing about it is having to try to explain it to somebody. So here goes nothing. It's 4 mini games. There's 3 teams. It's a round robin tournament. So the first 3 games, the part that I think is, well, I'll talk more about this later, about why I don't like this piece of it. But it's essentially one game with 4 quarters, and each quarter is a different mini game, right? So it's round robin tournament, U.S. Stars, U.S. Stripes, and Team World. They each play each other across the first 3 quarters, and then there is a quote-unquote championship game between the 2 teams that are ahead in the round robin. So Ant's team, Team Stars, played the first game against Team World. They won that game, and then they stayed to play the next game. So the whoever won the first game was then going to stay and play U.S. Stripes. And then obviously whichever team didn't play in that second game would come back and play the third game against the loser of the first game. So Anthony Edwards' team, Team Stars, wins the first game. And Anthony Edwards was huge in that win. That is the game. They all run together. I don't think that was the overtime game, was it? Was that the overtime game? No, that wasn't the overtime game. That was the game when Ant hits the 3 from the right wing. Devin Booker drives and kicks. And by the way, one of the good things, and we'll come back to this, is teams are actually running plays, like actual sets, like almost like an actual regular season, like ATO, or like, hey, this time down, we're going to set a back screen and Ant's going to come around. Like they were trying to get Ant open for threes. And they did it down 3. Ant hits it with 10, 15 seconds left off a driving kick from Devin Booker, finds him in the right slot. Ant knocks down a 3 to tie the game. But then the Team World, bear with me as I try and sift through which team is which as I talk about this. And also, by the way, the split box scores, we'll talk about that too. I guess I'm just going to gripe along the way instead of saving all my grievances for the end. Overall, much better. But, and then De'Aaron Fox ends up hitting the game winner for Team World. No, De'Aaron Fox isn't on Team World. See, this is what I mean. I have it in my notes here, and I even jumbled my notes up. This was the game when Ant hits the 3 that ultimately forced overtime, and then Team US wins in overtime, and obviously Ant was a part of that. Scotty Barnes hit a big shot, and ultimately the US team, again, Team Stars is the team that Ant was on. Ant hits the 3 that sends the game to overtime. Overtime target score of 5. We'll talk about that too. And Team Stars ends up winning. Ant was the guy who hits the shot to send it to overtime. The next game, they're down 5 with under a minute to play. Anthony Edwards crosses up. I think it was Kevin Durant, gets the basket and scores. Now they're down 3. He pokes the ball away from Donovan Mitchell. It has a 2-on-1 with Chet Holmgren. And instead of, there's 30 seconds left or so, instead of trying to hit a lob or something, he just pulls up for the game time 3, knocks it down. And then ultimately, Team Stripes ends up winning the game on a De'Aaron Fox buzzer beater a couple possessions later. But Ant's 5-0 flurry and steal is what got them there. So clutch moments from Anthony Edwards in both of the first 2 games played by U.S. Stars. Ultimately, Stripes wins that one, and then they beat the World by 3, which then allowed Stars and Stripes to play for the championship game, which ended up being a blowout. And Ant actually only had 8 points in that game. And it was like a quick flurry once again that led to a timeout and really pushed the lead. up much further, and he didn't have to do much else. So across the 3 games, Anthony Edwards ends up with 32 points, which, again, I'm going to gripe right now about the box score situation because you have to look at 3 different box scores. So I did not total anybody else's box scores because that requires a lot of math and tabs open in your browser and all that stuff. So I just totaled Anthony Edwards, and actually I didn't even really like total his minutes because I thought that was interesting. So he played basically 26 minutes across 3 quarters. So in 26 minutes, Anthony Edwards had 32 points on 22 shots. He was 13 of 22 shooting. He was 6 of 15 outside the arc, so fine. And had 9 rebounds, 3 assists. I'm actually surprised he didn't have more assists. He had a couple nice passes. He had a lob to Jalen Duren at one point. So again, Ant with 32, 9, and 3 across 26 minutes across 3 games, and a fantastic performance from Anthony Edwards. I thought that he had a couple open shots early that he turned down for a more open teammate shot, which I thought was great. But then when they needed him in clutch moments in each of these games, Anthony Edwards did step up and try and win and try and carry his team. And like you look at the roster that he was on, it made sense, right? Like Devin Booker would have been the only other guy that he would have maybe deferred to, but Booker didn't get all that many shots up. He scored like 12 combined points across the 3 games compared to Ant's 32. Like maybe Cade, but again, he's younger than Ant. Like Ant's seen more. Like it's the whole hierarchy thing, right? Like the Kawhis and the LeBrons and the Durants and even the Stephs. You know, Steph didn't play, of course, but those guys are all on the other U.S. team, and then Jokic and Doncic and those guys are on the world team. So in Wemby, so Ant is like the quote unquote highest ranking guy on this team. So it made a lot of sense that he would be the one that would get those clutch shots. And that's by and large what happened. I thought Booker played well. Booker had 4 assists in that first game. Let's see, across the 3 games, Booker had 8 assists. So, I mean, like he ended up being more of a facilitator than a higher usage type guy. But that kind of leads me into talking about the format. I thought the format was really good. I was very skeptical for the reason I stated right off the top of the show, which is it takes multiple sentences to explain it, and that like it's a little silly. So I'll say this. Let's say wins and sins, if you will, or like I would do for a Timberwolves post-game pod, I do studs and duds. A win for this format is the short games, and Ant actually noted this after the game. Is that basically them knowing this is a 12-minute game allows them to play harder, which I thought was interesting. And I wonder if it's just like the goals in sight where like you play a 48-minute exhibition and it's like, all right, we're going to be at this for a while now. And let's just throw lobs and not try. But this was like a sprint. And I didn't necessarily think until we were toward the end of each of these individual games. I didn't really think that through until then. And I was like, okay, these guys know this game's, it's like a pickup game when you're playing to 21 or whatever. And it's like, okay, we're getting down to it. It's when they do the Elam ending, the target score, which they did for overtime. We'll talk about that too. There's the end is in sight. And these guys are like, all right, I could do this in short bursts. And it matters. I think US versus the world as a format works. I don't know if they'll keep it. Obviously, this being an Olympic year was part of the reason why they did it. But other than the stretch, Norm Powell being on the world team, like they had to, and obviously Cat on the world team, which I know he competes for the Dominican Republic internationally anyway, but still, like they had to do a little stretching to get there. I like the idea if it works, in terms of having enough world players to fill that roster. I think it's cool. I do think it makes the world guys care more, maybe this side of Jokic, but like, I do think it makes the world guys care more. I don't know as much about the US guys. The older guys, the guys on Team Stripes have obviously done this for a minute, and they've all, for the most part, many of them have competed internationally for Team USA. So perhaps this is like, all right, well, I've actually competed for Team USA. Is this the same? But I like the idea. I wouldn't mind East versus West, but I think this is good. I think either one works. It kind of added an extra layer, and I think being an Olympic year gave it that additional juice.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking into the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Popular and niche events become much watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NBA. As the stars came together in LA, Kevin Durant got involved in some more drama on Twitter. The All-Star, who's always online, was accused of talking trash about other players from burner accounts, and Locked On Rockets host Jackson Gatlin looks into the situation.
So, in the midst of celebrating All-Star Weekend and all this good stuff, how do I even want to approach this? What appears to be another saga in the Kevin Durant Twitter burner story has appeared. I just feel like, sir, a second Kevin Durant burner has hit the timeline. Like, that's kind of what I feel like at this point. Here's the thing. There is a burner that was found on Twitter that people think is Kevin Durant. There is no proof of this yet. However, when you start to connect a lot of the dots, things look rather suspicious. And unfortunately for Kevin, given his past situations and his admission of using burners in the past, right, and being exposed doing so during his OKC days, almost 10 years ago, exactly, right? So it's like the 10-year anniversary, more burners, I guess. It doesn't exactly look good for him. That being said, there is no definitive proof that it's actually Kevin. And until that day comes, like I am not going to sit here and completely air out everything that this supposed KD burner said. I'm not going to tackle some of it, the commentary for, verbatim. What I will start with is by saying, really hope it's not him. Like that. This is essentially how we're going to address this, right? Is because I don't want to get into the specifics of what was said, although the commentary from this account was highly critical of the current Rockets team, very critical of former Kevin Durant teams. And the problem then therein becomes like, maybe the account is real. Maybe it is Kevin, but maybe other people have started fabricating fake images and using AI and Photoshop. And I don't even know why I'm saying nobody's going to use Photoshop anymore. AI is too good. Like it's ridiculous. I'm one of the old heads still using Photoshop. But my point is, like, seriously, it's one of those where the things that this account was saying about former teammates, about current teammates, about the current organization, not very flattering, right? And from that perspective, really, really hoping none of this is true. And that some of the evidence and some of the dots and things that are being tied together are all just circumstantial at best. That is my hope, because looking at the conversations and stuff that this account was having and all the screenshots and stuff being circulated, I can't imagine what that would do for team morale if any of it was true. In part because some of what the account was saying is not necessarily untrue. It's all just being said very, very harshly. And that's the other really disappointing part, is like it hurts because it's kind of true in certain respects. But it's on the surface seems like such a delicate situation. You would hope, right? You would think that, like, I don't know, maybe do you ask Kevin to like come out and issue a statement, right? Hey, that wasn't me. No, because then you lose, because then nobody's going to believe it, right? No, yeah, it definitely wasn't my burner account. I've definitely never used burners. You don't buy that apology. And then if he admits that it was him, right, that's the worst case scenario, because then it's like, man. And I'll tell you what, I will say either KD is 100,000% guilty, or he is the greatest troll of all time because he saw what was going down on social media throughout the day on Sunday and just chose to spend all day on his phone. Like, literally, he was on his phone in between games, in between the rounds of the All-Star games. He was on his phone while they were like doing layup lines, drills, whatever. Dude was glued to his phone. And how funny would it be, though, if like he was doing that because he knows that it wasn't him, right? And so he's just like, whatever, like it's a KD imposter and people are going to say what they want to say on social media. So I'm going to let them have their fun and I'll just, tune in for it, right? See what everybody's saying. And maybe there's a trust between Kevin and his teammates, right? Between Kevin and Alpi and Jabari, two guys that were like specifically called out in some of these messages. Maybe there's a trust between them where they know, hey, like Kev's cool, wouldn't do that, wouldn't say that about me, what have you. And they're all just having a big laugh about it. And I hope that that's the dynamic. I hope that that's actually what is at play regarding the Kevin Durant Twitter files, because the alternative is just so disappointing, right? The alternative is, wow, Kevin is the guy that everybody has painted him to be for years, right? Where he's, throwing teammates under the bus and he's frustrated and he's teeing up another exit from another franchise. I am choosing at this point to not believe that that's the dynamic, that's the case, and that's the outcome that we're going to expect from this. I don't expect there to be any kind of an official statement. I really don't. And hopefully this isn't my main hope, right, in this whole situation, that this is not, I guess, it'd be really sad if this was the breaking point for this Rockets team. But this is a Rockets team that's been unstable all year, right? That the vibes have not felt nearly as strong as they did the year before. This is to quote Ime Udoka from last season, right? The Rockets have a bit of a fragile ecosystem. And I really hope that this social media drama, whether true or not, is not the final straw that breaks the camel's back, if you will, for the Rockets this season. That'd be really, really disappointing, especially hoping that this team is able to kind of galvanize and come together during the All-Star break and hit the ground running post All-Star break and really make a push towards the playoffs and the tail end of the season, despite all their adversity and everything that they've dealt with. So if you were expecting me to sit here and read line by line through the KD files, I apologize for that. That was not my intent, not my plan, but I wanted to address it in some capacity because it's big enough amongst Rockets fans that I couldn't ignore it, but it's also not confirmed enough or whatever for me to actually sit here and give it any more validity than I need to in order to just address it and dispel it on the show. So I'm going to choose to operate with some cautious optimism that it's just some like weirdo KD stan imposter person, whatever, who's just been tweeting like KD and using his language for years. Because the tweets do even sound like KD a little bit. It's not a great look. If you're interested in what's going on with that and finding out specific details, you can go on Twitter and search it up, what have you. But that's all I want. That's mainly the points that I wanted to hit on for it here in the show, is that I really hope that it's not true, because if it is true, right, it completely changes my perception of KD as a person, as a player, what have you. And suddenly, like, I don't even know how you come back from that if it is true. It's a very delicate situation, one that I'm sure the Rockets are vetting and thoroughly kind of trying to figure out at this point, if there is even anything to figure out.
The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking into the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Popular and niche events become much watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 NBA. The Cavs hope this year is the one they can get back to the NBA Finals, and traded for James Harden at the deadline to bolster the roster. Danny Cunningham looks at the second half coming up for Cleveland on Locked On Cavs.
This one's going to begin with a question from the Clevelier on Twitter, who asks, why do you think Kenny changed so much of his approach from what worked last year to now? They changed a lot in the playoffs to an ISO-style basketball, which has always hindered the Cavs. What do you think the addition of Harden does to change this approach, if at all? So I do think that when you look at the way that the Cavs have approached this year from a schematic point of view, things were always going to be a little bit different. And part of the reason why things were always going to be different is the personnel is different. Like, think back to who the Cavs were last year and who they had available. I think that it's safe to say we have seen over the past 2 years, we are on our fourth version of the Cavs. Because you think back to who the Cavs were at the start of the season last year, where they were this incredibly deep basketball team. Karis LeVert played really well for them. Obviously, George Niang was part of the rotation. Then those two get traded to Atlanta in exchange for DeAndre Hunter. And DeAndre Hunter had a great second half of the season in Cleveland. But like, that version of the Cavs was a different team than what we saw earlier in the season, right? Like, those were two different teams. And then this year, with no Darius Garland or at least a very limited Darius Garland, for most of the time that he was on the floor when he was on the Cavs, is version number 3. And then you trade Garland for James Harden, you're on the fourth version of the Cavs that Kenny Atkinson is realistically coached. So as far as the schematic approaches, I do think a lot of it has to do with personnel. Like, were the Cavs better last year because they played a different style of basketball, or were they better last year because they were healthier? Like, we have 27 Cavalier games left this season, and they have already missed far more games due to injury this year than they did all of last year. And that is something that does have to be part of this conversation. I think that the biggest reason for Cleveland's success last season in the regular season is because the team was really, really freaking good. The second biggest reason was because they were also really healthy. Darius Garland played 75 games. Jared Allen played all 82. I believe Evan Mobley played 71. I think Donovan Mitchell played 68. Like, this was not something where they were trying to piece things together the same way that they have been so far this year. But you are right. Like, there was more ball movement last year. I do think that they played a little bit of a different style of basketball. And then, as we have seen, when the postseason arrives, things tend to change. But I also look at it and say, well, the Cavs didn't look all that different against the Miami Heat. They looked different against Indiana. And part of that is the Pacers were obviously a very, very good team last year. But I also do think injuries had a lot to do with that. We will never know this answer. There's no way to know it, and it's something that I think is going to bother a lot of Cavs fans forever. But we will never know what the Cavs would have looked like, a healthy version of the Cavs, what they would have looked like against the Indiana Pacers in the playoffs last year. We will never know if they would have won that series. Maybe it's the same outcome no matter what. Maybe Indiana was just a team of destiny to a certain extent before Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. We will never know those answers. But we also don't know that it would not have worked, right? Like, that is something that I do think is worth thinking about. Now, as far as the Harden acquisition, I do think this is something that makes the Cavs a better postseason team this year. And I know that there are some people that are going to roll their eyes at that comment because James Harden is not the guy that exactly has the most sterling postseason track record. I get that. But he has been there. He has done that. He's been in a lot of postseason games. I mean, there are very few guys that have played as many playoff games as he has that are active in the NBA right now. So I think that is something to bring into account. But I also look at the role that he's going to be in, and that is something that I do think could be pretty beneficial to the Cavs. I look at where they're at right now, and James Harden has, for a good chunk of his career, most of his career, been the best player on his team. He's not been the best player on his team since he left Houston, right? He goes from Houston to Brooklyn, and he teams up with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant is the best player on that team. James Harden is the second best player. Kyrie Irving is the third best player. Then he's traded from Brooklyn to Philadelphia, where Joel Embiid wins an MVP award with James Harden at his side. Obviously, Embiid is the best player on that team. And then from there, he goes to the Clippers. And I don't want to say he wasn't the best player. Like, I do think Kawhi is a better basketball player than him, but James Harden is just infinitely more available. So there's a discussion to be had there because he was just the guy that was playing more minutes. Like, that matters as part of this conversation. But now I look at this, and the thing that is different about all of those teams versus now is James Harden has never been the second best guard on a basketball team. That is something I feel pretty confident. And Donovan Mitchell right now is the better basketball player. I don't think that's a discussion point. Like, historically, Harden's an MVP. You know, he's made so many first-team All-NBAs. Like, I'm not having that discussion. I'm having the discussion right here, right now, who's better at basketball. And I think Donovan Mitchell's the answer to that. So what does that make James Harden's role look like in the postseason? That is something that I don't know we have the complete answer to, and we won't until the postseason begins for the Cavs. But I do think that he's going to be very beneficial in terms of taking some of the load off of Donovan Mitchell's plate. I'm very interested. What is it going to look like when James Harden doesn't have to be the guy in the postseason down the stretch? Because even in Philadelphia, one, Joel Embiid did miss a significant amount of postseason games because of injuries. But two, Joel Embiid is not somebody that can do everything himself, because big guys in the NBA, with the exception really of Nikola Jokic, who is basically a point center, big guys in the NBA don't have that, right? Like, they need somebody to get things going for them. And now James Harden has somebody else that can get things going for himself. And Kawhi Leonard could certainly do that and was capable of doing that in LA with the Clippers. And Kevin Durant was with the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that Nets team was very close to actually winning a title, considering how good they were. And I mean, it basically feels like a once in 100-year thing may have prevented them from winning a championship, with Kyrie Irving's vaccination status being that thing. And Harden did have a hamstring injury during that series against the Bucks too, which is worth noting. But I just look at this and say, they now have more firepower. They also, I think, have less places to pick on defensively. Like, is James Harden a good defensive player? No, he's not. But he's also got size, and he's got an ability for the Cavs to be able to hide him in different areas. And I am curious, one of the things I would be fascinated to see over the course of the rest of the regular season is, what do the Cavs look like defensively when James Harden is on the floor? How do they deploy him? Where do they put him? One of the drawbacks of Darius Garland defensively is not just that he was not a good defender, it's that he had to defend guards because he was 6'1", where James Harden doesn't have to be put on a guard. If a team has two good guards, like for instance, let's look at who could the Philadelphia 76ers have in a starting five in the playoffs, right? You know they're going to have Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, Paul George when he gets back from his suspension, Joel Embiid, and then that fifth starter could be Kelly Oubre. It could be somebody else. Like, they have a few different options. James Harden can go on that wing. He doesn't need to defend VJ Edgecombe. He doesn't need to defend Tyrese Maxey. He could theoretically be put on Paul George, and you have a little bit more defensive flexibility. So I do think that is part of the reason that this team is better suited for the postseason. And they also have somebody in James Harden that I think is going to really elevate the minutes in which Donovan Mitchell is not on the bench. And those are not going to be the biggest postseason minutes. And he doesn't need to do it by scoring, because I don't know how many times we can look at this and just say, you know what, the best player on any given team is on the bench, and that team still has just an absolutely elite level pick and roll duo, because that's what the Cavs are going to have. Like, James Harden has already, I think, made life very, very easy for Jared Allen. I think he's going to make life even easier. Like, the fact that those two look as good together through 3 games so far is an incredibly positive sign for the Cavs. The more opportunities they get to work together, I do think we're going to see that tandem get even better. And I think that grouping should be a very, very good one when the postseason arrives. I'm very interested to see what happens when the postseason arrives, what happens when Evan Mobley is healthy. Like, there are a lot of questions that I think we still need to answer as far as James Harden goes, as far as what this team is actually going to look like. But I do think it's fair to be optimistic with the direction that this team is headed.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 NBA. If you follow football or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NFL and on campus going up every weekday, just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NFL or the Big 3 in 30 College wherever you're listening or watching right now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 NBA.